Please pardon the mic and volume as I experiment with different options.
The point is, I would gladly step in front of traffic for you, Truman.
And the last thing I'd ever do is lie to you.
And the last thing that I would ever do is lie to you.
The last thing that I'd do is lie to you. As I sit here in some of the most challenging moments of my life, as alone perhaps as I ever was, I sit and wonder, what is a friend? What does it look like, feel like? And what isn't a friend? Well, here's a scene. It's a person who's been by this man, Truman, by his side since he's 7 years old. He's playing the role of friend, and there's words coming out of his mouth that sound friendly. And I personally just want to throw up hearing them. For those that haven't seen it, this is a scene from The Truman Show, a movie about a man whose whole life is a TV show, literally, and he discovers it around 30 years old. And the world more and more makes him feel like he's the crazy one when he's trying to point it out. It's gaslighting turned up to 1,000 and carries so many ethical issues it's hard to count. And in this scene, Truman is confiding his fears in his lifelong friend, who is in on it, who knows Truman is right, and he still denies it and says the words, "The last thing I do is lie to you." It's so sick in the context, let alone the lines are literally being fed to him, but even just to say them at all. Now, there's what to say about the pressure on the friend here in this fictional world, multi-million-dollar acting contracts, a nation full of viewers who would be devastated, potential legal and professional consequences. He isn't sharing the line in a vacuum. And yet, whatever friendship is, it's not this. It can't be this. Hell, this may be the opposite of it. Friendship can come in many forms, many flavors, and can evolve and flow over time, over our lifetimes. There are important gender differences in how it looks, feels, societal norms and expectations, class and other socioeconomic factors. So I'm going to split this episode into two parts. In part one, I want to try my best to define friendship. What it can be, what it can't, what it isn't, and what is really an abuse of the term. And in part two, I want to talk about my friendships, past and present, where they went wrong, horribly wrong, and where they went right, and where they're at now. I don't make these episodes, or this episode as a whole, lightly. Friendship basically describes a relationship between two people. Romantic partners can be friends, as can family, but friendship itself is not tied to those categories. Friendship comes in many forms. I think it carries many traits of, and can even be described as polyamorous in a way. That is, that we have multiple spaces for different kinds of friendship and can have multiple friendships at once. And different friends can meet different needs. We can have primaries, also known as best friends, but at the same time, many different kinds of friends in between. We can have friend breakups, and the pain can be really real, and this is an understudied topic, which my cohort member, Dr. Alyssa Shapiro, actually covered in her dissertation. I'm linking below. And of course, we can have new friendships, bud up at any age. It's never too late to make a friend or to rekindle an old friendship. I also deeply believe in the power of short-term interactions. Even one-off conversations can be life-changing, to feel deeply heard, felt, seen, maybe by a stranger at a party, a friendly cab driver, or sweet food vendor at your local market. So yeah, there are the small interactions, people who you like. Maybe you know their name, maybe they know yours, but I don't know if you're necessarily gonna go for dinner with them. These can be your acquaintances, the person you smile to on your daily walk, your favorite pizza shop owners, local bus drivers, and other folks who can be part of your community and your web of connection. And how that smile, that thank you, that is real and supportive and can feel deeply loving. When my favorite sandwich shop or snack bar knew my order, it was like my love language. It didn't hurt that the food was really good too, but yeah, it was just super sweet. And sure, they had financial incentive to be nice and smile, but goddamn, that felt good. It felt like I was cared for, and I loved supporting them in return with my patronage to their establishments. This does have its limits, of course, and can be surface, but can also be part of a healthy, balanced meal that is a network of community and friendship like branches on a tree, or maybe more like small beams of support. It's not the vital columns, but it's doing something. It's holding this whole picture together. And so I think that's on one of the lower levels of friendship, not in that it's not sweet or important, but I think that friendship can be so much more. Next up the ladder, we can get people who we have good working relationships with and or based on circumstances may be stuck together. These connections may not be as sweet as those I described in the other category, but they can be vital. It's like someone in the battlefield with you. If it wasn't for this scenario, be it work, school, teams, or hell, even the army, you wouldn't be connected. But here you are, stuck together, and there's a bond in that shared experience and a shared looking out for each other and perhaps even helping. This, of course, has its limits and also has its abuses. Not all of these connections are supportive or pleasant, and after your shared thing ends, you may never speak again. But in the moment, these connections can be vital and help people get through challenging and really isolating spaces. There are, of course, friendships with people like bosses, mentors, people above you in power dynamics, and those carry their own complexities. This is the other side of the service dynamic I described earlier, where before the person in service was incentivized to be nice to you. Here, you are incentivized to be nice to them because, things like safety and job security are important. Of course, they can be friendly and even friends, which is so helpful when it happens. But again, it has its limits. And damn, can these go so wrong so fast. I'd like to dedicate an entire phase to problematic power systems I faced during my doctorate program. And yet, when done right, a healthy relationship here can be world-changing and so healing and make working for someone a pleasure and even a therapeutic experience. Next, I'd like to mention a category or shared passion friends. That is, friends attached to certain areas of interest. You may have video game friends, politics friends, gossip friends, sports friends, spa friends, fitness friends. These are fun shared connections and shared interests and can be really sweet and have moments of real depth. Some may even evolve past this stage and just start off that way. And either way, these relationships can play a vital role in what is a healthy friendship network. But of course, it can fall short. These friendships can risk being shallow or surface, and the extent to which these friends will support you during hard times or even in other areas of interest may be suspect. Twist your knee on a run with your running friend, I imagine they'll be there with ice and a good regimen for healing. Maybe some sweet get well soon text. Need to be bailed out of jail in Mexico? That's a harder call, and one I'm not sure they're running to answer. Get it? Running? Okay, we move on. Next, we have roommates. They're not quite family. They're not quite work colleagues, but they do carry aspects of both. You share intimate space and are basically tied together, whether you like it or not. Obviously, you can move, but that's more complex. Our roommates are often, at first at least, our family members, and are just one of the many different roles family members could play. As we work our way up this relational ladder, we'll find some more complex relationships actually carry aspects of all of these friendships combined. And to recognize this idea is actually really important, particularly if we're trying to gauge where we are reliant on a person. And if there are areas of improvement, perhaps, in different dynamics of the relationship, or in cases of abuse, where there will be a needed replacement if we want to leave. For example, in the abuse case, An abusive spouse may be paying rent. And so while they are abusing one aspect of the friendship, the dynamic of I am your rent payer is one that you've grown to be reliant on. And they actually may be holding over your head, and that's extremely problematic. But if you want to leave, you will need to find a new rent payer. And that could be yourself or your new employer or the government, or you could just go ultra economical on rent and try experiencing being unhoused. I'm kidding, but that's not funny. This actually happens to many. And please see my disclaimer. If you haven't, this is not psychological advice. But yeah, in so many cases, to save yourself from abuse, you need to factor how these other areas that you were reliant on will need to be replaced. And that's finance and security, but it's also the small things. Emotional support, presence, hell, just having someone to write in as an emergency contact. I'm getting lost, but yeah, these categories can be populated by the same person in different roles and often is. So where were we? Roommates, right, laundry, smells, dishes, and dealing with the potential sounds and feelings of their romantic partners, just their day-to-days. These dynamics can be really intimate and supportive and yet carry a functional role, and there are risks associated. Depending on the way the finances are split, you're kind of stuck with this person and may even need them for their half of the rent or their whole of the rent. And tensions do not easily go away if there are. You are forced to face them on an almost daily basis, especially if you share spaces like the kitchen. And so these dynamics, because of how intimate they are and how persistent they are almost certain to replay other dynamics in our lives, especially our early life dynamics. So even if you are long past your family of origin, it's hard to run from this. And basically, often it's spaces like the kitchen that become a stage for recreating whatever challenges we are going through in our own lives or perhaps went through. As a relational therapist, I think this is happening all the time, where we're always replaying dynamics, even in small dynamics. Everyone reminds us of someone, and if they don't, they kind of play a role of stranger. That is a space in our heart we reserve for newcomers and outsiders. But don't worry, don't you worry. They'll too find a familiar category soon enough if they stick around long enough. Of course, healing can come, and it can come when you begin to recognize these patterns, the dance, if you will, and to learn how to name it together, how both of you played a role in it, and hopefully catch the cycle in its tracks, creating space for new and interesting relationship styles to be made. It's not easy, but it can be eternally rewarding. And suddenly we can see the kitchen in a roommate situation is not just a kitchen, but perhaps a space or even a stage where our conflicts play out. Unspoken tensions, unsaid hurt. It's a lot easier to retaliate unconsciously with some undone dishes than to actually tell someone you were hurt. And God, can it be frustrating to find that mess and bring up all sorts of feelings of not being cared for, not paid attention to, not being valued, and yet it's also a space for potential healing if addressed consciously with awareness of all the many dynamics that are also going on in the space. And those include potential power dynamics and abuses of power. People, of course, can choose to live alone to avoid these conflicts, or if they can afford it, get a maid, but it seems to always find a new field to play in. If there's stuff, it's going to come up one way or another, especially in spaces of extended shared time and connection. We've all been carrying stuff for generations, and there's healthy ways to address that, and there are just, not so healthy ways. The blow-ups, the unspoken and buried feelings, and so many other examples of how this can go so wrong. I want to be very careful in this conversation to acknowledge survivors of abuse here. Naming their unconscious roles in the abuse is really delicate and needs to be seen in the context of power dynamics. This is certainly not their fault by any margin. And my psychological theories that I've been taught to describe these experiences, I think, fail to fully capture them because they were theorized and codified by people in positions of power trying to defend those positions and from that lens. And so to say that both parties play a role in abusive dynamics can completely ignore other factors at play, like privilege and societal norms that can have people being subject to repeated abuses. And I'm definitely not here to further that cycle of blame. In a world that has emboldened, supported, and normalized abusive behavior, in a world that has discriminated brutally against the impoverished, the racial and sexual minorities, and so much more, and punished those for experiencing mental health symptomology related to these abuses, all of this is happening in that context. And finding truly safe spaces for people abused can be a life's work, and a nearly impossible one at that. And is all too often the burden of that is put on the person being abused. And so, if and only if this is helpful, we can begin to learn and discuss about potential ways people participate in abusive dynamics, tendencies that can even attract them to abusive partners or have them ignore red flags and even unconsciously invite boundary crossings and violations. Of course, this is all super complex, and for those in it and experiencing the abuse, it can be horrific and almost impossible to notice. Remember, we are not assigning blame. Let me repeat, we are not assigning blame, only naming that there is potential in some cases for maybe more awareness and agency if that is helpful. This is tricky. Remember, folks, we live in a society that historically and currently blames the abused. These tools and insights should never be used to further those cycles, and sadly, they end up doing the same. Okay, we continue up our friendship ladder, and we find the idea of close friends. These are people that have transcended just being people you know in a place, or who share a hobby, or work at the sandwich shop you like. These are the people you share your fears with, your excitements, your sadness, your joy. They are people who you can call when going through something challenging, or maybe just to sit with you and keep you company at dinner or a movie. It isn't reliant on the dinner or the movies and isn't tied to a location. It's more than that. It's special even, or at least can be. These kind of dynamics can be mimicked, of course. There are those that have people they are very close with and spend lots of time together, and they still might not be safe spaces for being real emotionally. Just because you have 20 years of friendship together doesn't mean either of you know how to talk about feelings in a healthy way. And we can look at part 2 for many examples of that. And so, what is a good close friend? Is it just a mini therapist? I think it's more and different. Obviously, the close friend isn't getting paid, and the power dynamic is more equal, hopefully, and it's hopefully reciprocal. Not perfect, but the other person is gaining something from it too. Sure, maybe one friend listens more than another, but the listener may enjoy that role and may enjoy just being present with the other person. It doesn't have to be an exact one-to-one trade, like if, oh, I do 30 minutes of talking and then you do 30 minutes of talking. Of course, that too can be a healthy part of these dynamics and have its own deep parts, but can also end up feeling transactional and end up more like our sandwich shop example than a close friend. But anyway, I will say in their healthy and supportive forms, close friends are hard to come by, and many never get to experience this level of friendship in a healthy way. That is not to say that long-term relationships aren't supportive in their own right and don't play important roles, but I'd argue that many of my old dynamics that were very long-term mimic too much of the other categories that I didn't call these people when I was struggling. Hell, I couldn't even name that I was struggling. That's not just on them, it's on both of us, and a reflection perhaps of the pool we were swimming in, one that, especially for people born into male bodies, did not value being vulnerable emotionally. God, what are you, a bag or a pussy? And so I don't want to disavow some of the specialness of those old dynamics. There were certainly moments of mutual shared connection in shared spaces that felt sweet and supportive at times. I just feel, well, having experienced levels of emotional vulnerability and the depth of connection that is possible, it's hard to still look at those connections I once called close friendships and even consider them up to par in this category. Not to knock the importance and specialness of what those were. I love some of these people and hold deep, warm spaces in my heart for them. But just to acknowledge how much room there was for more growth and depth. I'll bring up some concrete examples of this later on, but I really ask you to consider that even if you spend enormous amount of time with a person and know them forever, that that may not mean that they are supportive, that they are kind, and that they're being good friends. And this gets into the question again of what the hell is a friend? And if these people weren't my friends, then what were we doing? Is this guy Truman's friend? They've known each other since 7 years old, and yet they're basically work colleagues, maybe world roommates. Truman is trying to be friends. He's being vulnerable here, really real, but it's not being received in a reciprocal way. It's being denied and manipulated. That, for me, not friendship. That's transactional and abusive. Truman's getting the shit end of that deal. Now, part of me is saying that what I'm describing as ideal friendship is actually love, not friendship. That is what it feels like to be loved. Not in the romantic sense, but in the sense that you're being seen, heard, felt. When the sandwich man smiles at you, I think it's a version of love. In that moment, they may be meeting a need. It's sweet and can feel and can even be very loving. The higher we go up the friendship list, though, I think it correlates with just how deep our needs can be met and how loved we can feel in those dynamics. Uh, and of course, that comes with its own expectations of reciprocation, and maybe even the more you spend time you spend together, the more pressure to make it work. And this is hard, and finding people to trust in these categories is not easy. There's also no friendship in a vacuum. We all have a variety of needs, and it's hard to just go buy or trade for a new one in a transactional sense. We can do it, and in a way we do it all the time. We have friends for things, as I described, but it's tricky, complex. And if you start to think about it, most of us don't have people willing and ready to be what I'm describing here as close friends with us. You can't force anyone to do this. This is something that has to be developed, earned, and hopefully mutual. And for me, why I think it's important to think about this is because the more that we can define what friendship looks like or can look like and what friendship means to us and what our needs are, the better we can get those needs met. The more we can make this place, this world, this experience of living a more loving and pleasurable place. I realize people have all sorts of desires, and friends may or may not be able to meet those. But I'm not talking specifically desires here. I'm actually talking about what I see are needs. I'm talking about the need for validation, love, support, kindness, and yes, physical needs, safety, security. I don't think these are things that are finite in the sense that we totally lose by giving them. It certainly doesn't feel like a loss in the moment. Obviously, there are boundaries and limits to how many people we can do this with, but meeting people's needs in shared context can be some of the most rewarding experiences we can ever have, and even more so when that's reciprocated back with the person we care about. I mean, wow. And so I do think there are a category of people who may not be able to validate you, but happen to be the same people who would show up to your hospital bed or bail you out of jail. And they may or may not be family. It's not exclusive to family. But those people, I guess, would be sandwiched into the close friend category. But where it's split is what needs are those close friends meeting. And if you consider that more friendship, or perhaps better labeled as commitment, and that's not to knock commitment. Commitment's important and can make people feel safe. It can be part of a close friendship. But for me, I don't think it has to be for a friendship to be a high level one. And I don't think high commitment would inherently make it a friendship and that you can suddenly call it high level friendship. I also want to acknowledge needs that change over time. And someone who was once a supportive presence may no longer be, and they may still want you, though, for what they were getting before, which was maybe commitment, presence at their celebration or by their hospital beds. And what I guess my open question is this something you want to be committed to? Or are you doing so over some sense of guilt or obligation based on years of knowing a person? Is the commitment based on love and an outgrowth of that? Or is it just because you can't even picture what it would be like to say no and maybe fear retaliation and or guilt? And now this is complex, as it can be hard to tell people no in a time of need. They may need support. And for me, the friend is, in those cases, really being asked to play the role of home aide or nurse or therapist or hell, in some cases, even doctor. And those roles need to be filled by someone And certainly, everybody needs someone to care for them. The question is, does this have to be you? And do you want this to be you? You are not the only person in the whole world who can play this role, and very often people are paid to play these roles, and for good reason. They are and can be exhausting, and maybe they can't afford the help of this person who's saying they need you. But from my perspective, that's more of a commentary on where society is failing to support basic human needs, and much less so a commentary on how you're a bad friend or a bad child. And we're also bleeding into the codependency categories here. The enmeshed blurred boundaries that are breeding grounds for any future therapist or a person who feels the need to take care of others' feelings over and in spite of their own needs. And as noble as that sounds, can be severely abusive and lead to severe mental health consequences, including deep self-hate and even self-harm. Basically, in many of these dynamics, people are taught that if they don't oblige, they risk losing safety, security, and even love. And worse, it is a moral failing on their part and may even be considered a psychologically diagnosable offense. Some labels are thrown out there way too easily. You only care about yourself. Anyone got a reverse Uno card handy? And so, yeah, these can be things we can call close friends. I'd call many of those unhealthy close friends or problematic close friends, or perhaps more kindly, close friends that just don't meet the highest potential of that dynamic. There's so much that close friends can become. It can be so healing and even can rewrite years of emotional abuse and unhealthy coding. Close friends can be chosen and even become like a chosen family and act so kindly that they fill those roles your birth family may have never been able to. And that's not a moral chastisement of the families of origin, but more so commentary on the potential to seek more, to seek better, and to know that better exists. With birth family, this gets complex. So many obligations, so much history, pressures. It's really complicated, but ultimately I think every relationship can be examined on the basis of this question, or these questions. Is this feeding me? Does this feel loving to me? Does this feel supportive for me? Am I excited about this? And I hear it. If people only thought like that, we'd have a world of selfish people who abandon each other in times of need. I don't know about that. Again, I think this may be more commentary on the failing of our capitalist democracy and its inability to provide basic needs to people, and those responsibilities end up falling on family members, and suddenly your aging mother or grandmother becomes your weight to carry almost alone, because who else will? But I just see that as a deeply broken system, because in doing that, you're basically putting social pressure and what should be, obligation of the society on individual people to sacrifice their own emotional needs. And as some put it, put on your big boy pants and swallow your emotions. And this can put a lot at risk of both emotional and even physical abuse in the name of being a good son or daughter. Now, I'm slowly bleeding away from friendship, but I don't think this is unrelated. And if anything, I think good friendship can naturally grow into having people who we want to care for and be by our sides and be by their sides. This can happen within families. We can be best friends with our siblings and have healthy, supportive parental dynamics. But I don't think it should be exclusive to families. For me, opening up the potentials of friendship to meeting these areas creates more options for people, and having more options personally raises the standard for what is acceptable. It breaks the monopoly that blood relatives have on family roles. Yes, what a great way of thinking about it. It's opening up a shop that can compete and offer an alternative and incentivize all parties to sell a better product and not abuse their customers. I'm starting to crawl towards an argument of having more adult figures in the lives of children also. Could you imagine how much less child abuse there would be if children had access to more healthy adults in their lives to model what healthy relationships look like and what the difference is, and not have to wait until your late 20s to find out, or if ever? Now, how to do that is a question for another day. I think there are merits to communities that implement things like group parenting societies, but for right now, just understanding the position of children born into and trapped in families. And sure, maybe they have aunts or uncles or grandparents or as other adult figures. And I'm a big fan I'm actually a big fan of these multi-generational households in some cases. But so often these alternatives carry the same shitty dynamics. And yeah, they have alternatives at school, like teachers and camp counselors and potentially therapists can play a role. But if all three of these people are being paid for paid for by the parents, then we can see some tricky incentives that can scare these alternative adults from making any actual impactful interventions out of fear of rocking the boat or risking their own reputations. Especially if the abusive parent in question is a popular and loud voice in the community. And now think about it. If a therapist uncovers a case of emotional abuse for a child, what options are there? Is the foster system really much better alternative? That's a terrifying position to be in for both for the clinician, but ultimately, who loses? The child. They lose the most. And so suddenly, how I made it so long without even realizing that my friends and even family were not supportive of me and even abusive is tragic, but not impossible to understand. We can see the networks that made it happen, what was available for me and what wasn't. I'm certainly exploring alternatives to my community of origin. Something I am living in now here is called an intentional community. There are many different versions of this. Mine has about 12 to 15 people who live together, share responsibilities like land ownership, and eat communal meals 5 nights a week. We have daily check-ins, weekly heart shares. It's really sweet. Now, this is far from perfect, and there's many around the world to explore, and that's something I actually really want to do. I'll link a website with places around the world that are possible to visit. And certainly, though, be careful if considering choosing to live in an intentional community. Work trades can lead to exploitative dynamics. Many communities have narcissistic leaders and enmeshed power systems and behave in cult-like fashions. These places are not removed or immune from the many problematic dynamics I am naming and have named on this channel. Whew. Before we end here, this part one, I'd like to review our final category. How could I forget the category of best friend? This is a rare one, and for me, looks like someone who can see me for me, someone I'm excited to be around, and someone who has consistently shown up in ways that demonstrate a being I can trust with my heart and full self. Have I found this? I'm still exploring. And ultimately, it's hard to say, but I feel I have not yet felt this in its totality, and yet I felt tastes of this. And I'm a believer that this exists, not just in romantic dynamics, but even in friendships. I think I can find a friend that can do this. I think they do exist, and hell, maybe I found this person already, and maybe not. I think any healthy dynamic is a growing one, and one that is being questioned in a healthy way. And as scary as that can be, to question close friendships like that, and with some scarier answers, I think it can be ever rewarding, because with each no and maybe, which is somewhat basically a no, that can lead you closer and closer to your full ecstatic yes. And oh man, even once you get to that full ecstatic yes, a full ecstatic yes today is not an ecstatic yes tomorrow. I think it's something that keeps evolving. And in a scary world that begs us to plan and predict and build towers of safety, bringing up questions like this, questions about whether close friendships are really doing it for you, is terrifying. Understandably so. And yet I think it can be so rewarding, ever rewarding. It's worth noting, as I mentioned, that friendships can be polyamorous. That is, one friend doesn't have to do it all. And for me, finding a friend that can meet me at my highest level and be with me in that is certainly a goal of mine, one I'm not sure I'll ever fully meet, but one I'll keep striving for in my current relationships and beyond. Another potentially difficult and scary idea is there are only so many slots for close friends. Sometimes I like to think of it as, like in Pokemon, you can only carry 6 Pokemon at once. Is 6 the limit? I don't know. where exactly the line is, everybody's different, and love can flow infinitely. But staying in a dynamic that is taking energy, time, efforts can block the pathways to finding something new. And this is where we get the hardest breakups. These aren't the people who have been abusive, so to say, but people who just might not be meeting your highest level of excitement. This category I call the maybes. And maybe the friend can just stay in a close friend role instead of the best friend. I think we can always use more close friends. And they may fill other necessary roles like safety and security. It's complicated. This isn't straightforward. But I just invite you to openly wonder to what extent remaining in certain dynamics that don't meet the needs that I've been describing here is helping the cause, is helping you get closer to those feelings of what an ideal friendship could be. It is possible, again, that friendships can grow, and it's also possible that they might not be able to. What is an ideal friend to me? Well, let's go back to the Truman scene for a second. We see two longtime friends. Some would have even called these people best friends. Truman, in his plea, makes a request. In different words, I'm paraphrasing, but he's basically asking, will you support me, even if it means leaving you? And his friend had a choice. A hard one, but still a choice. One many friends, certainly friends of mine, have faced, as I've moved through so many different stages of my life. The question is, will you support me, even if it means leaving you? Truman's friend doesn't, and ultimately Truman sails away anyway. And if part of me dreams he finds a friend, maybe it's in the girl he was dreaming of, or maybe someone who he never met yet. Who knows what lies behind that door? But if Truman doesn't risk it, he'll never find out. And all this, I'm taken back to the theme of this phase, and that has been nostalgic mourning. For me, this process has been vital. To name what was good, what was sweet, what was fun, to hug it, to grieve it, to cry over it. And basically, I didn't get that chance. In so many of my dynamics that I left, the person I was leaving often didn't want me to leave and was even actively harming me for it as I did. And in so many cases, we never got the chance to cry together over the thing we were both losing, and that was our friendship. We never got a chance to walk down the boardwalk and reminisce, to mourn the good times and just talk out the bad and just smile as we watch the sunset on a chapter of our lives. For everything it was, and everything it wasn't, and everything it could have been, and everything it couldn't. So tune in for part 2, where I'll name some really problematic things that happened to me in dynamics I called friendships. And I think talking about it has value. I want to do it, and also, of course, don't. But I wrote it, and if I'm reading this and you're hearing this, that means I recorded it already, and it's probably waiting for you. So yeah, that's where I'm at now. I will end here with so much more to discuss, so much more to experience, and yeah, lots and lots of crying and healing to do. Have a magically delicious day.